Hey, what's up, guys? So it's Wednesday on the HPR Chronicles. First question I have today is, when was the last time you were at a restaurant and you got asked to tip, but you didn't think the waitress deserved a tip? Today we're talking about tipping, guys, and the history of it. It's the HPR Chronicles with Shakur and Smith. It's the only podcast that's hip, cool. It's from a pop culture perspective. HPR stands for history, politics, and race. And we're telling the truth. If you don't like it, we're sorry. Not sorry. Like we always say, it's not pro-black, pro-white, pro-Hispanic, pro-Asian, none of that stuff. It's just pro-truth.
Facts.
It's facts.
True.
We just try to research it and you guys facts in a fun and an interesting way. Sometimes it's deep, sometimes it's introspective, sometimes it's fun, it's serious, all that good stuff. We're talking about serious stuff on this podcast. So once again, today we're talking about tips. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Email us at rptalktruth@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments. Leave them in. All the information will be in the description below. And thank you guys for listening on all the streaming platforms: YouTube, Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Buzzsprout, all the cell phone apps, iPhone and Android. Thank you guys for checking in and listening to us. And we're going to keep this thing going and try to bring you guys, positive, factual information on history every Wednesday. Again, starting last Wednesday, we started doing it every Wednesday.
Correct.
So today we're talking about tips. Because of our busy schedules, man, I didn't really have a chance to research this subject like Chris. I do know about the subject, so I'm just kind of going to let Chris take the lead on this particular subject, and I'm just going to take notes. And I'm just going to take notes as he speaks so I can interject. But I think you guys will be surprised to hear the history of tipping and where it actually came from when people ask you for a tip.
Yeah. So, like he said, you go to a restaurant and you get your food, drink, or whatever, and when you're done, you leave a tip. It's always been a customary thing to do. We've done it for years. Where did it start? Why did it start? That's a question that no one really thinks about. You just do it because it's always been done. Well, to let you know that it started in Europe, actually. It was kind of with the feudal times where the feudal lord and the serf, the person in charge or over that person, would give them a tip for doing an extraordinary job. So if they did something they felt was a little bit special, they'd give them some extra money or something. So, like I say, it started in Europe, and it started in, not sure exactly when it started in Europe, except for the feudal times.
The year, like what century?
But what I don't have a time for when it started there. I didn't research that part. I just worried about when it came here.
Okay, gotcha.
So wealthy Americans in the 1850s and the 1860s discovered the tradition, and they brought it back because they wanted to feel and be sophisticated and look all special by tipping people when they came back. And then it became just part of culture. So then it's kind of not known is why did it. Okay, so it started, it happened, and then people kind of opposed it and was not really wanting to continue doing it. They felt that it was not fair or not right to tip someone when they were getting wages. Well, and then at one point, slavery ended. And when that happened, the jobs that blacks or ex-slaves could get were very minimal.
Yeah. Meaningless.
Well, I want to call it meaningless.
Minimal. Oh, okay.
Just jobs that would be waitresses and railroad pullmen. So those were the most common jobs that African Americans would end up, or ex-slaves would end up taking.
So this is right after slavery.
Right after slavery. Okay. So here you now have gone from being on the plantation, and you now have a job, and you're thinking, oh, I'm about to get wages. Well, no. What they decided to do was, instead of you getting wages, you're going to only get tips. And so the people riding on trains, they would tip the person who would, stamp their little or take their tickets. Right. And then again, we all know waitresses and stuff or waiters. You would work in a restaurant and you would not get paid, but you would get tips. So the whole aspect of it went from not thinking that it was a good thing to people liking and wanting to continue it. So just to add the facts to it, after the ramification of the 15th Amendment in 1870, slavery was ended as an institution, but those who were freed from bondage were limited in their choices. And so the people who didn't end up becoming sharecroppers, they ended up working menial positions. That's what I'm trying to say. Menial positions. As servants, waiters, barbers, and railroad porters. So someone who's bringing not only checking, but also bringing your bags onto a train and stuff like that. So porters, and they again were just given tips as their salaries. So these industries demanded the right to basically continue slavery with a zero wage and a tip.
Right. So basically, just to get it straight, these business owners would depend on the public to pay these ex-slaves salary based on a system of tipping.
Yep.
The public would just give them whatever change they had, and that would be considered their actual wage.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's very crazy.
Wow, and it's funny. What's interesting about what you said is now. See, I didn't even know it started in Europe first. And today, if you go to Europe, they don't even accept tips.
Correct, and
yeah. Because I've been to Europe many times, guys, all around Europe, and they don't even accept tips in Europe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, as you said,
it's almost offensive to give someone a tip in Europe.
It went from Europe being the tipping spot where it began to them realizing, oh, this is not a smart thing to do, or not necessary. Because I'm sure they realize that if you pay someone a correct wage, why do you need to tip with it? Right. Where in America it just continued. Well, okay, so there was a point where there was an anti-tipping movement, and there was actually laws that were put into place that prevented certain states had said no tipping's allowed, just statewide. And then
what was this? You know what time period this was in?
Yes, I do.
That's interesting.
Sorry, looking for it. Okay, 6 states. Despite tipping remaining prominent, many remain unhappy about the custom in the years following the Reconstruction. So after after Civil War, this Reconstruction period, 6 states temporarily abolished the practice in 1915.
Oh, okay.
And then in 1918, Georgia's legislative deemed tips as commercial bribes. So basically, the tips for the purpose of influence service, and they deemed it illegal.
Oh, okay.
Now, the only, one other interesting thing is Iowa, their decision in 1915 to make it illegal for gratuity, they would it would be the person who took the tip would get jail time as opposed to the person who gave the tip.
Oh, interesting.
That is kind of,
okay.
It's almost like if you consider it illegal and it's a bribe, maybe, I don't know if that's the term or whatever, but it should be the person who's giving it, or, as opposed to the person who's getting, benefiting from that extra. But then there was a pushback, and the practice grew in popularity popularity in many southern states. So then by
I'm not surprised it was in the southern states.
Yeah. By 1926, all these laws had been repealed and deemed unconstitutional by the respective states' Supreme Court. So in essence, what they were actually starting to stop, they decided, oh, no, this is actually beneficial. We don't have to pay,
Right.
whoever we don't deem to be important enough.
Right.
And
Just have the public give them a tip,
Exactly.
and they should be happy with that and go home.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the way tipping works today is pretty much the way it worked in the New Deal era. There's a minimum wage there's a federal minimum wage, then that's a non-tip wage, and then there's a federal tip wage, which is only $2.13. And so, as you know, whoever you're working for or with, this part I'm not really clear on, but it seems that if you don't make enough, you're supposed to somehow, your employer should offset you. So if you don't make enough in tips that make it so that you're making at least a minimum wage, which at the time of the article I'm looking at, minimum wage was $7.25, which that is a little bit low at this point. But I did double check, and $2.13 is still the non-tip minimum wage.
Right.
So, and I also read that Herman Cain, who at the time was oversaw a pizza, not Hut, but one of the pizza. Sorry.
Yes, this is interesting.
One of the pizza companies, and he fought to separate. So at one point, the non-tip and the federal non-tip minimum wage and the federal minimum wage was kind of going up together, but then he got it to be separated so that the non-tips still stayed here, but the other went up.
Right.
So anything you want?
No, yeah. I mean, I have a lot to say, man. It's crazy. I mean, first of all, I want to say that it's interesting how, in today's time, in present day, guys, how restaurants expect us, the public, to pay for their food and pay their employees' wages.
By
tipping them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They want us to help pay their wages.
Yeah.
Because, if you go to a lot of jobs now, and I know just from friends that work in the food and service industry, they're like, yeah, I get so-and-so plus tips.
Yes.
It's almost like a part of the thing where I remember it just being optional. But now you're almost pressured to actually tip and feel funny if you don't tip. I mean, I remember years ago, I'm old enough to remember when it wasn't even on your actual receipt, and now they actually give you the number. And I remember when it went from 10% to now it's a sliding scale, 18%, and it go over to 25%.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So instead of it being optional, which technically it's optional, we're not obligated to give anyone a tip.
Correct.
It went from that to now they print it and show you, hey, either give us 18% or all the way up to 25%. Pick whichever one you want.
And I'm going to even add something that I thought was kind of funny is I went to get some food the other day, and not every place does this, but it was interesting as I was purchasing it, the woman was like, oh, now you have to put my credit card in. She was like, if you look at the screen, there's another question. And the question was tip. And it was 10, 15, 20. Automatically, you're all done. So all you have to do is press a button. But it's like, I'm here to get a sub or a sandwich or whatever, and I'm paying a tip for the person who rang up. I get you're making my food, but it's not like I'm sitting at the
restaurant is making millions. They don't need us to help pay their wages.
Well, if I'm correct,
it just increases their profit margin by us tipping on this old system that needs to be gone, like it's gone in Europe.
Yeah, it does need to be removed because there isn't any.
And you know what, Chrissy, because it's so mandatory, you will find that some waitresses and service people act shitty, and they don't even care because they know they have to tip me anyway, because it's become such a normal staple that I've been in situations where people act shitty knowing that you're gonna leave them a tip no matter what.
Now I'll say, I think, like, if someone's not treating me right, I'm not going to tip them 20%, or, you know.
But
and
you
it's a
still
sign.
tip 'em.
Will I still? You're right. I'm still gonna throw something, but I'm going to let them know that they're not appreciated. So
Right, because you feel obligated, you're gonna say,
you're still gonna, but you're gonna, you never give them nothing because of the fact that. I know. Okay, so the one other thing about this, the whole aspect of tipping, and depending on where you're at, like if you're in New York or maybe Chicago or even out here in California, you know, a lot of times people are getting paid the minimum wage. So any tips is actually above their normal, what their salary would be. You know, like that, like you said, it's just now an extra amount. But it's kind of.
What am I tipping you for? I don't understand. But I'm paying you already.
I get it, but what I wanted to say is, you can go to certain states and a person is working, and so this is where it gets kind of not. I don't want to say it kind of gets sexist or a little bit. Yeah, okay, because a lot of when we're talking about restaurants, a lot of people working there are not just college students, or it's not just their first time job. It's a lot of single mothers that are working these as waitresses.
Right.
So if they're only making $2.13 and they're working at IHOP, Denny's, you know, someplace like that, and they don't get a tip because whoever comes, or because of how cheap and inexpensive the food is, how much are you really tipping for them? So this isn't just them having a extra job or needing some extra money that because mom is paying, you know, and they're just living at home or they're in college or whatever. This is their actual living wages. So the important thing I'm saying is getting rid of tips or having people have a living wage, getting paid a nice wage, and then giving tips if they do, you know, work above, you know, like, oh, I really felt their service was really good. This person was really nice and connecting and was on top. Like, we've gone to places and have thrown tips and the person rarely even came to our table, you know?
Right.
And it's just like, what am I tipping you for?
The
like,
next time I'm gonna say,
and you know, we should start being like, here's $1 because that's how I felt like I was treated myself.
I'm gonna say the tip is do better service. I'm gonna just write that in instead of putting the dollar amount. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be, and you know, it's different out here in California, I think, because there is no that $2.13. You know, people are getting paid good, and that's I gotta say, I've since I've been out here, I've been wondering, like, why are we still tipping? Because if everyone's getting at least a minimum wage, they're, you know, certain jobs like out here in wine country, tip your wine servers.
Right, exactly.
Wink, wink. But that, you know, like, but that's different. You know, when you're in a bar, you do try to tip because you want that person to come back to you.
Exactly.
You know,
you want them to give you a stronger pour,
or you want better service.
You want better service, you know what I mean?
Quicker service. But you know, you don't want to be ignored. But
exactly. And what I wanted to say real quick too, if I can interject, I remember when Uber came out. This is before Lyft, and they touted themselves as the taxi cab. You don't have to worry about tipping.
Yep.
That's all done. It goes right through the app. You pay, and you can just walk out. You don't have to give no tip. It's all in the service. And then when Lyft came out, Lyft implemented a tip for their drivers, and then Uber added a tip. So the very thing they touted themselves for, this big selling point of not having a tip, they ended up tipping anyway.
Yeah.
And what am I tipping this driver for? For making a left turn and making sure he watched to make sure a car wasn't coming? What am I tipping him for?
Well, I would gotta say Uber and Lyft are just a whole different dynamic.
For talking to me on the way, what am I tipping them for?
But do they get paid a minimum wage?
No, they get paid per ride. I don't know what it adds up to. I know in New York now they get minimum wage, and they're trying to do that in Los Angeles. But you know what I'm saying? But even if Uber and Uber sold themselves as the
Nah, yeah.
No tip.
Yep.
Unlike a cab, just get in, do your ride, pay. Then it turns into tipping anyway. You know what I mean? And again, in these situations, what am I tipping for? You know what I mean?
You're just tipping to be tipping.
Kind of like what you said.
Well, you're tipping for the
right?
convenience. You're tipping for the convenience of the fact that you got someone. I guess.
Why am I
Uber's
tipping
different
the valet guy?
I just feel
the valet guy is just getting paid to drive my car up to me. Why am I tipping him? Why am I tipping the bellhop that's bringing my suitcase in the hotel room? He's getting paid to do that already.
Correct.
What am I tipping him for? For rolling the card in correctly? I mean, I'm just trying to figure it out.
Oh no, I agree. No, again, I don't. I would.
Everybody wants
I gotta
a
say,
tip.
I take my bags and I take it up myself. So I'm
me
not.
too.
But you're right. Like, why do I tip the guy who brings my car up when? But if it's done right, the person's taking your car somewhere and they're bringing it back to you. Now,
But he has to do that right anyway.
Say what?
He has to do that right anyway.
He has to
take
do it
your
right.
car back and bring it to you.
Correct, with no scratches and everything else like that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because whatever establishment you're at, they're going to be liable. If it's a parking company, they're going to be liable.
True.
But now everybody wants a tip. It's like everybody gets a tip. You get a tip. He gets a tip. Y'all get a tip.
I want a tip.
I want a tip too. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I want a tip just for doing this podcast. You know what I'm saying? It just trips me out, man. Like, everybody gets a tip now. And like I said, it's not like years ago when it wasn't on the check. It was really optional. And And I remember going some places, right?
Here's your tip for the podcast.
I got my tip, guys. I'm keeping it too.
No, you ain't. I gave it to you.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, you understand what I'm saying though?
Yeah.
I remember years ago, you didn't feel obligated to give a tip. If you felt like, that person wasn't that cool, I'm walking away.
Yeah.
It wasn't no big of a deal.
Yeah.
Now it's a huge deal. And on top of that, there's this stigma around black people and us tipping.
Never tipping
and us
enough.
not tipping and not tipping enough and never tipping. I've literally been to places and I could tell I was treated differently because the waitress who was there was like, "Oh, this is a brother. He probably ain't gonna tip me much." So you're
right. It's bad. It's bad two ways. It's like, as black people, we are treated like we won't tip. But we were the ones giving the tips in the first place. That's probably why we don't want to tip. Yeah, and then
tip, by the way. Go ahead.
And then on the other flip, you got people, and it's been in the news a little bit here and there, where someone has written something so negative about a person, and then not tipped and walked out. Or you got those people who throw, like $100, $200 on a
They over tip.
Yeah. But yeah, I do definitely. I think everyone should have that whole aspect of, I'm going to pay you this $2 and something, and you have to make tips to cover the rest of your wages is ludicrous.
It's ludicrous.
It's just ludicrous. Like, why? And I get, and while I was reading, there's people, the proponents who want to keep tipping around. They, they cite examples of waiters making $100,000 a year,
with or without tips.
With their tips.
Okay.
But of course, where are they at? They're most likely, or majority of them are in New York, where it's high scale restaurants, where you might end up dropping, and definitely in Chicago too, where you're going to drop maybe $1,000 on a meal.
Whether it's you and a guest or a group. Yeah.
And so, a person's going to walk out, that waiter's going to walk out with a couple hundred, a night.
Yeah, I remember years ago when I would hang out with some of my celebrity friends in the industry, we would all go out to eat, and the bill would be $1,000, $2,000, $2,500, easy, $2,500, easy. Because it's this particular star we're with paying for everybody.
Got it.
He doesn't care, he or she. They're a millionaire. They're like, hey, it's on me.
Yeah.
Everybody, it's nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in those cases, those waitresses I remember at the time was getting $200-$300 tip easy for that night.
But Go. I'm sorry, I did interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I'm gonna go a whole different way. So I wanted you to finish your train of thought.
No. I was just gonna say I could imagine those people when they go home, they get huge tips in those environments. Just like in New York, if you go to like L.A., Hollywood, where there's a huge population of entertainment and sports entertainment, people are out and about. West Hollywood,
Correct.
The prominent areas of downtown. You know, you have your ball players. Everybody, those type of people are gonna be leaving huge tips to people.
Correct. And I agree. Like when you go into a club, and depending on, you know, especially the ones that or you can't sit any place because the only place to sit is in a VIP area, or you know, if you want a table, you got to pay $100
and that person's gonna be serving everybody.
Yeah. And then in order to sit down, you got to buy a bottle. You know, so you might going to if we go club wise, you're gonna be dropping at least $500, if not more, you know, depending on the location.
That's
and that
low.
You know, and then that person gets a tip out of that, blah blah blah.
Right.
The part, or the main reason why it should not and it should be eliminated is, like I said, you've got single mothers working in restaurants that are, you know, are fairly cheap, and they're not making a lot of money off of tips, so they're barely surviving on a daily basis. And the bad part about this is by having them in a restaurant, and I'm just using Denny's and as an example, because a lot of people have gone to those restaurants in IHOP or whatever. It's the part that's bad about it is the single mother that's working there has to deal with a lot of sexual harassment. Has to just deal with rude and customers because of the fact that they do rely on a tip. So that's it's kind of two ways. You say some people don't care how they act because they automatically feel they're going to get a tip. Then you got places that don't, that people who do really rely on their tips, so they're going to go hopefully above and beyond, and then people are going to take advantage of it. And again, you got men probably spanking butts or making comments like, "Hey, I'll pay you some extra if you blah blah blah."
And what I wanted to say too was I like when I actually go to a restaurant and the waiter or waitress is actually real and personable, and you could tell they're not just doing that for the job. And if they're faking it, they deserve Oscars because they're good actors. You know what I mean? So I appreciate some good real service, and I actually enjoy tipping those kind of folks.
Yeah,
like if the sliding scale is 15% and 25%, I'll tip on the 25% end if the person is real and they're cool and stuff like that, even though I still don't believe it's correct.
Did you just say 25%?
Yeah, you actually see that now.
I've seen, I did today, or the other day, I saw 10, 15, 20 maybe. But normally it's like 15, 18, 20 is what I'm normally seeing nowadays. Or maybe it is 15, 20, 25.
I've seen 18, 20 or 22, and then 25. I've seen that the other day.
Yeah, so
I was like, wow. You want a third of the bill?
Wow.
Like, that's what that is. No, a quarter of the bill.
Yeah.
Like, okay. You know what I'm saying?
And it's almost like you, and the other, on top of that, like people who work in the service industry that can't really pay for, that are, waiters or waitresses, and they want to go out themselves, they can't even do it and tip on top of it. It's just it's the system again on having not a person not making enough. I think it would equal out where if people were paid a minimum wage, and then when you went out to dinner, you wouldn't have to, that all those numbers, those 15, 20, all that stuff can come down then, and then we could get back to maybe, 10% is really high, and I'm only giving a 5% on, or maybe 10% just becomes the standard, and it's just like, or no, maybe 15 becomes, this is exceptional, 10 is like, that was good, 5, I hate you, or maybe, I don't know, but just the fact of, nothing's getting cheaper, but yet we're putting out way more money every single time, and it's just,
Yeah. Well, guys, before we go, I'm just going to give you some tip etiquette real quick. So if you don't know, and you can correct me on some of these if you can. But I know if you're in a restaurant, pretty much no matter what state you're in, you just pretty much double the tax, right? And you pretty much around the right area.
Correct. Yeah.
Something like that. And then in bars, guys, etiquette is like $2 per drink, no matter how much the drink is. So if you and your buddy are out and you get 2 drinks, the etiquette is $4. Anything above that is welcome. You know what I'm saying? That's like
that I heard
etiquette.
was $1 per drink.
No, it's actually 2.
Well, I think it depends on the cost. So if you're in like Wisconsin and your drink costs $5,
yeah,
I'm not paying $2.
Yeah, that's true too. But
So
I
it
think
kind
for
of
me,
depends.
I'm so used to doing 2. I'll just do 2 if I'm in the Middle East, in the Midwest
Yeah.
too. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
And then
They'll love you.
Like for valets, I actually looked this up a while ago. So for valets and stuff, because I've always wondered, tip etiquette is like $3 for a valet.
Oh, I'd be over it.
and a bellhop. So if a bellboy takes your luggage up, tip etiquette is $3.
Okay.
He shouldn't get upset for anything $3
or above. Okay.
You know what I mean? Those are the etiquettes. I'll definitely put those in the description. And for those that's watching on YouTube, maybe I'll even flash it on the screen. You know what I mean? But I'll definitely put those in the description, though. What those amounts are. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything.
Now, you said...
And even for car washes, too. When you go to the public car wash, the etiquette is about $3. Anywhere from like 3 to 5 at the car washes.
So now you said that I think it depends on your taxes. So we got to be careful about the tax thing.
That's what I was saying. Is that a pretty
again, when I lived in Wisconsin, it was 5%, like 5.5%. So I could just like easily enough just go 5 times blah 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 and come up with the number. But I don't know. Sometimes I look at a bill and I'm like, there's no way I want to, drop an extra blah, blah, whatever, $40 on something. Like, dang, did that person really deserve that 40?
Right.
Right.
So I have a funny question to ask. So guys that are into hookers and shit who can't get laid, do they tip the hooker? How much do they tip her?
That's a good question. I don't know. I really don't know.
I'm just being funny, guys. I'm just thinking about tip extremes. You know what I'm saying?
Anyway. If you want me to really answer, I could. But that's funny. I mean? That's funny.
Yeah, man. So no, that was a good one. I didn't know.
So they charge 50, you give them 55.
55.
Sorry.
Funny.
Oh
man. Yeah, that was a good one because I didn't know it started in Europe and all that. I knew the story about slavery, how they picked it back up, and
and it was all about
to this day. I knew that, but I didn't know it actually started in Europe and stuff like that. It was probably way before slavery, even though Chris, we didn't have the exact date.
And I'm sorry for not having it on time.
No, it's cool. It's cool. I'm sure it was way before. You guys could do your own research when you get a chance about tipping. Is that it? You had anything else you wanted to say?
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay, before we go, make sure you mail us a tip. No, I'm just kidding. Doing a podcast. All right, guys, it's the HPR
I want 25%.
Right, and I want 28%. Anyway, it's the HPR Chronicles with Shakur and Smith. This episode was about tipping, the history of it, where it came from, why we still do it today, and all that good stuff.
And why we should eliminate the 2-tiered system.
Yeah.
It should be one, should be just a flat wage that everyone would get.
Yep.
And I'd still say, because it is a service, if someone is doing a service for you, you might want to give them extra. But it shouldn't be.
To me, we shouldn't be obligated.
Yeah, exactly.
To me, the rules should change, and we should just, out of kinds of, this person was cool. Let me shoot him a 5 spot, or a 10 spot, or whatever it may be. You know what I mean?
Now that I think about it, hold on. Let's go. Are you supposed to tip moving people if you move?
No, but people do it sometimes, though. Everybody expects a tip now. I'm serious.
I just want
everybody.
Okay.
Everybody expects a tip now. It's crazy.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, man. No, it's all good. Anyway, guys, it's HPR Chronicles. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Don't forget to subscribe. Everything will be in the description. It's rptalktruth@gmail for the email if you have any questions or suggestions. You can still put stuff in the comment section, of course. Like I said before, thanks for listening on all the streaming apps. All of them. You know who you are. iTunes, Spotify, Google, Buzzsprout, Stitcher, all
Much
that
love.
good stuff. Yeah. Much love. Thanks for checking in. It's the HPR Chronicles, and we are out. Don't forget the tip if you go out tonight.
Peace.
Peace.